Good afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? It's still morning. So good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, November the 11th, 2020. It is currently 11:54 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church located here in Ovalo, Texas. Okay, that's all of the typical introduction. Welcome. Thank you for listening. However you may be listening, we greatly appreciate it. We love to hear how you're listening, how you discovered us. Please take some time to email us at newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, because we really like to know, how people stumble across our podcast, which app they're using, because that just gives us kind of an idea of where we're being effective. Maybe give us ideas that we need to focus more on that particular app or whatever the case may be. So any information you can provide, it's always helpful. We greatly appreciate it. And you just send us that information via email, and we won't bother you or, send you things or irritate you or anything like that. We'll just take that information and see, okay, what should we do with this? So we greatly appreciate it. All right. So we'll just leave that there. I could talk a lot more about that, but that gets us into a whole discussion about podcasting and trying to figure things out. But that's a whole different topic for a different episode. What is my goal here today, right now? Well, it's Wednesday. And as you notice, I'm not here in the evening time for the Wednesday evening service. I'm not because of different things going on. I'm here now, so I'm trying to produce things now that then the people of Victory Baptist Church can use this evening, kind of for their Wednesday evening service. And one of the things I've tried to do for the live streaming era of Victory Baptist Church, this whole really weird world of trying to figure out how to do church, one of the things I like to do is to turn on this microphone and say, hey guys, here is a Bible study exercise. I'm going to give you a little Bible study exercise. And now I want you to take it. And this evening, I want you to sit down as a family, as an individual, sit down with a Bible, a notebook, and I want you to dig into the scriptures and I'm going to give you a guided Bible study exercise to really get you to dig in. Now, I've been trying to do these. I can't say that it's been, I don't think they've been very successful, but I still think I don't want to give up trying, because I think there's got to be some people out there who want to be handed a kind of a Bible study exercise to really get them into the scriptures, to really get them to dig in. And so if I can find one person out there going, hey, I love those Bible study exercises, I've really benefited from them, then I have accomplished something, even though maybe others, Christian podcasting is different than all other forms of podcasting, because I can't worry about what I think people want. I got to give them what I think they need. And I think what Christians need right now is to really dig into the scriptures, not just to be passive listeners, but to be active students, active participants, not just to sit there to let me tell you everything, but you picking up that Bible, you digging in, you grabbing that notebook, you working, you studying, you struggling and dealing with the scriptures. I think that's where spiritual maturity and growth really occur. So that's what I'm going to try to do in this episode. Now, if you go back in the archives, I don't know how far back, I did a podcast episode on Trump, the election, and pride, or something along that, Trump and pride, using some things that Trump had said about not conceding the election, some of the things that he had said. I used that to get us into a discussion on the subject of pride. And I want to return to that subject. And I even stated, I think in that episode, that I thought about doing that kind of as a Bible study exercise. And I even kind of offered up maybe kind of a Bible study exercise in that. But I want to return to it, add to it, flesh it out a little more. And really, I'm pleading, especially to the members of Victory Baptist Church. Please, tonight, if you can, use this evening. If for some reason you can't, use tomorrow. But I really want you to engage in serious Bible study on the subject of pride. And I'm going to give you some things to do. But we're really just going to jump in, and I'm going to build kind of a scriptural foundation to get us started. We're going to look at one scripture, and hopefully I can give you something to really use this. For those who are not members of Victory Baptist Church, please use this Bible study exercise with yourself and people you know. because I think Christians really need to look at the subject of pride. Pride is a very important subject. So let's just build the foundation and we'll just jump in. All right, here we go. Before I start preaching, let's just dig in. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6, because I think this really gives us a very important starting point. Proverbs chapter 6, starting verse 16. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16. These 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. Now, here are the things that God hates. These are the things that are an abomination to God. Now, if you listen to some Christians, you think that on this list would be, I don't know, homosexuality, sexual immorality, pornography. You think it would be like, sometimes it seems like the things that we think are the biggest sins, well, do they show up in this list? That's the question. So let's just look at this. All right, here we go. So these 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 are an abomination to him. Here they are. Number 1, a proud look. A proud look. God hates a proud look. Now, what is that? That's the idea of being prideful. God hates pride. What else does he hate? He hates a lying tongue. He hates hands that shed innocent blood. He hates a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running into mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. Those are the... Now you would think, come on, God, there's some other things here you need to put on your list. But God is the one who determines it. But I want you to realize he starts with pride. He starts with pride. And we have to ask ourselves, and I want you to really consider this. Why do you think God starts with pride? Why does he list pride as the very first thing that he hates? One of the things that are an abomination to him. Why do you think he starts with pride? Well, what do you think the issue is? Why is pride so serious? Pride, and I've talked about this in the other episode that I did, pride is the exaltation of self. You exalt self to the point that you do not see God or others. When you become so prideful, you have no room for God or other people because you become God. You become the person you worship. And that's in the heart of all of us. We are typically the God we worship. Now, we may say, no, we worship God. But if you look at the God that we worship, we do a lot to recreate him into our own image. We've heard the famous saying. I know it's somewhat of a cliche at this point, but it's a saying that still should speak to us in a very profound way. But I think at times we just kind of roll our eyes, but it's important. God created us in our image, and we return the favor. God created us in his image, and then we return the favor to recreate him into our image. So sometimes the God we actually say we worship is really nothing more than ourselves. Pride is a serious problem. It exalts self, and and really at the expense of God and others. We no longer have room for God in our thoughts and our heart, and we don't have room for God, for people. It's all about us. Think about it this way. Pride. Pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. Pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. Now, we always hear reports of carbon monoxide poisoning and having those carbon monoxide alarms and detectors, carbon monoxide detectors in your house because you can't detect it. You don't know it's there, but it will kill you. So listen, pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. It silently and slowly kills you without you even knowing. Pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. It silently and slowly kills you without even knowing. Now, that quote is not original for me. I don't know who originally stated it. I heard it in a sermon, and I placed it in my notes. So I don't remember when I heard the sermon or where I heard the sermon. I just know that I know that thought is not original with me. But the idea is powerful. Pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. It silently and slowly kills you without you even knowing it. You don't even know. So I want us to really think today, this evening, tonight, members of Victory Baptist Church, how is pride evident in your life? How is pride evident in your family? How is it evident in our church? We need to eradicate it. God hates it. Pride is completely incompatible with Christianity, because Christianity is about love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. Have no other gods. God is supreme. God is on the throne. God is high and lifted up. God is the priority, the purpose. He's everything. The purpose in our life is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Pride cannot coexist with that, because pride elevates us. Pride says, no, your purpose in life is to glorify yourself and to please yourself forever. That's what pride says. No, glorify yourself and please yourself. Pride is the carbon monoxide of sin. It silently and slowly kills you without you even knowing it. How is pride present in your life right now? So here's, again, I'm kind of giving you some answers, but I'm trying to give you some basic questions to get you started in your conversation with others, with your friends, whatever. You can use this on social media to get your friends talking about it. But so the first question is, why do you think God, the very first thing he lists as something he hates is an abomination, is pride? Why? Why is pride the first thing? I've offered a little bit of thoughts there of why I think it is, but okay. And I want you to ask yourself, and I really want you to write down, try to identify some ways in which pride is currently evident in your life. Write down a tangible, clear example of how pride is currently present in your life. Maybe it showed up in an argument with your spouse. Maybe it showed up with the way you dealt with your kids. Maybe it showed up at work. Maybe it showed up in your attitude here. Maybe it showed up on social media. Just where is pride clearly evident? If it's there, we've got to get rid of it. It's incompatible with Christianity. All right, so I want you to see. So why does God start with pride? And secondly, how is pride currently present in your life? Give me some examples. All right, let's go to another scripture. All right, so there's Proverbs chapter 6. Let's jump over to Proverbs chapter, is it 16? Is it Proverbs chapter 16? Yes, Proverbs chapter 16. Jump down to verse 16. We'll put this in context. Proverbs 16:16. How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver? The highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He that keepeth his way preserveth his soul. Now here it goes, verse 18, Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride. First pride, then comes destruction. First pride emerges, then destruction follows. Better it is to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. Humility over pride. Which do you value the most? Do you value humility or do you value pride? What do you value the most? No, now you're going to tell me you value humility, but if you value humility over pride, then is humility the thing that's most seen in your life? Let's do this. Let's use this for a text today, this afternoon, this evening, whatever time it may be, whenever you work on this. Let's go to Luke chapter 18. Let's go to Luke chapter 18. I think this is what we're going to. I think we'll use this. Go to Luke chapter 18. You probably know this text, but knowing it and really taking, making a powerful impact in your life is a totally different thing. Go to Luke chapter 18. Let's go to verse 9. Let's go to Luke chapter 18, verse 9. Jesus, here we go. We'll find out what's going on here. Luke chapter 18, verse 9. And he spake this parable, that's Jesus speaking the parable, unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. So he's speaking this parable for people who do two things. They trusted in themselves that they were righteous. They think that they are righteous, that they think they're godly, they think they're better than other people. And it shows up by despising other people. They trust that they are righteous and they despise other people. So what they do is when they see other people, they see their sin, they don't see their sin. And I've said it before, humility is the impossible task of being more concerned about your sin than other people's sin. Humility is the almost impossible task of being you're so aware of your sin first that you have a hard time seeing the sin in other people. And people, we fell to this. I've given this example 100 times, but I'll give it again. When I lived in Nebraska, we would volunteer at the Open Door Mission, which is a mission for homeless people. And one of the things they would do before they gave food to the homeless, they required them to attend a chapel service. Now, many of the homeless people were not very happy with this, and they were very, very rude. I remember getting a hymn book thrown at me when I was trying to preach. You would be trying to preach, and the people would sit there and they'd open a newspaper and hold it up, clearly indicating you they're not listening. It was hard to imagine how ungrateful people could be. Hey, where they're getting ready to give you free food, and they're giving you a nice warm place to stay, and you can't even bother to show respect to the people trying to preach the scriptures to you. It was sad. It was sad, but it happened. It happened a lot, sadly. It happened a lot, but that's a whole different story. But so we were there, and there was a time I wasn't preaching. I don't remember who was preaching. And I don't remember all the details. I mean, these are years ago, so I hate when I recount. I hate when I sometimes use something for an illustration and I don't have all the facts because I don't want to in any way misrepresent the facts. But I have to rely on my memory. But here's basically how it went down. There was they had a little music service before whoever was going to preach, and I don't remember. Maybe I was going to preach that night. I can't remember who was preaching. But before the preaching, they had someone who she had been homeless. I think maybe she was still homeless, but she had come to faith in Christ. I think she'd gotten off drugs. I don't remember all of her story, but it was a pretty crazy story. I think she was still living in one of the shelters, but she was there, and she was going to sing a song before the preaching. And so she gets up there to sing. And the women who were there from the church who were present, some of the women, while the woman was singing, they were whispering to one another, and guess what their issue was? The way the woman was dressed. The woman, I guess, I don't remember how immodest she was, but supposedly she wasn't very modest, and she was standing behind a platform singing some song of praise to God. And guess what the women saw? They didn't see, here's an instrument, here's someone who has received God's grace and mercy, someone who has been forgiven, someone who's been saved, and they're trying to praise God. They're still in a very rough a rough situation. Clearly, they've got a long ways to go. Clearly, they need to be discipled. Clearly, they need to be loved. Clearly, they need to be supported. Clearly, we need to be there for them. But guess what they saw? They saw, how dare she gets up there and sing praises to God looking like that. How immodest. Now, I'm not saying that someone should just put anyone immodest up in front of everyone to sing. I'm not saying that that's all, you've got to think things through and you've got to be wise. But sometimes, listen, humility sees your own sin. Like before you condemn her, what about you? What about your life? But see, pride is you can't see yourself. Pride doesn't see itself. Pride doesn't see that at all. Pride sees her, right? As you're the failure. You are unrighteous because I'm righteous. See, pride creates a situation where you see yourself as righteous and you despise others. You don't see yourself righteous and love others. No, you see yourself righteous and condemn others. You despise others. Humility would have looked at her and said, am I praising God? Am I grateful for my salvation? Would have started allowing the situation to speak to them. Humility is the almost impossible task of being more concerned with your sin than other people's sin. Humility is the impossible task of being more aware of your own shortcomings and failures than of others, even when the other person's shortcomings and failures are right in front of your eyes, because the first thing you do is look to yourself. But pride doesn't look to self. Pride, those women sat there thinking that they were morally superior than this woman who was singing a song of praise to God. They thought that they were morally superior because they had dresses that went down to the ankle or wherever. They had long dresses. They were not immodest, so they're godly. But look at her. Look at her. Jezebel. Look at that harlot. I'm not saying they used those words, but that was the mentality. So Jesus is getting ready to tell a parable. And who is it for? It's for those, listen to me carefully. It is for those who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. And you may not think we're one of those people, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of us that we trust in our righteousness. We think that we're righteous and we despise others. It shows up in us all the time. So we need to heed this parable. Let's listen to the parable, right? Luke chapter 18. Let's go to verse 10. 2 men, so we have 2 individuals. They go up into the temple to pray. Now, I want you to note, both of them go to the temple to pray. Both of them are going to pray. Both of them are obviously religious in some way. They have some belief in God, and they're going to the temple to pray. But please note, the approach to their faith is radically different. The first one goes up, the Pharisee. He stood up and prayed thus with himself. Now, this is pride clearly lived out. The man's basically praying to himself with himself because pride removes God. Pride removes God. Let me make it clear again. Pride removes God. Pride says, God, there's no room for you. Get out of the way. I don't need you, God. I'm praying to myself. Now, you say you're praying to God, but really you're praying to yourself because the God you worship is really the God that you created in the image of yourself. But the Pharisee, so read this again. The Pharisee stood up and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I'm not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. Now, please note, this man, the Pharisee, he's the prideful man. And guess what he does? The prideful man only sees himself as being the best, being superior, being righteous. The prideful man sees his righteousness more than he's aware of his sin because you know why? Pride blinds you to your shortcomings. Pride blinds you to your sin. Pride exalts yourself at the expense of God and others. He doesn't see God high and lifted up. He sees his righteousness is high and lifted up, and that's what he's going to praise God. I praise you, God, because look at how good I am. No, we're supposed to see God high and lifted up and see how messed up we are. But what happens is sometimes as Christians, we look at, I'm a Christian and look at how godly I am and look at how horrible those other people are. No, you should say, I'm a Christian, and by being a Christian, I see God high and lifted up, and I am so painfully aware of my sin, I can't even be concerned with other people's sin. Now, I'm concerned with other people's sin in a sense to try to help them, but even when I do so, I'm aware that I'm no better than them, and I'm probably far worse. Their sin may have been public, but my sin is just as bad and private, and it's horrible, and I'm ungodly. Pride doesn't allow you to see that. See, this person is prideful, so what do? God, I think I'm not like. In fact, let me go through the things he mentions here. He says, I thank you, God, I thank thee that I'm not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. See, he's not praying to God. He's basically praying to himself. He's not praying to God, exalting God. He's exalting himself. And guess what he's doing? He exalts himself, right? Because he thinks he's righteous, because pride, he can only see the good in himself. And then guess what he does? He immediately despises other people. Hey, not like that publican. Not like the publican. I'm not like him. You remember when Peter made the claim, others may deny you, but not me. Because Peter was filled with pride. I will not deny. Others may. Others are not, as godly as I am. Well, that worked out really good for you, Peter. First came pride, then came your destruction. Just remember, you may want to write down in your notes, look up the cross-reference in regards to Peter and how he viewed the others when he was confronted with his possible fall. Yeah, That's important. You'll see why, because you're going to get an assignment. All right, so remember the questions I've given you so far. Why is pride the first thing listed? I'm giving you a lot of possible answers. And second, how is pride revealed in yourself? Well, I've given you some examples of, do you do that? Do you see your godliness and everyone else's failure? Do you see your moral superiority and everyone else's moral inferiority? So he exalts himself. He sees himself as righteous, and he despises the other person because he mentions the publican. The publican. I'm not like him. And then look what he does. I fast twice in the week. I give tithes of all that I possess. So he prays, and please note what he gives as the proof of his spirituality. What proves his spirituality is that he fasts 2 times a week, and that he gives tithes of all that he possessed. So the proof of his spirituality is what he does. The proof of his spirituality is what he does. This is my problem in many cases with the lordship view, because the lordship view is, how do I know I'm saved? Look at what I do. Look at what I do. I do these things. I don't do that. I do this. Therefore, I know I'm saved. I know Jesus is Lord, because Jesus is Lord. Therefore, I don't do certain things. It becomes about your righteousness. It becomes about your righteousness, your deeds. How do you measure? Here's another question. So number 1, why do you think God starts with pride? Number 2, how is pride evident in your life? Number 3, this is very important. How do you measure your spirituality? How do you measure your spirituality? I want you to really think about it. How do you measure your spirituality? How do you know you're spiritual? Is your spirituality based on like the things you do? Does that really prove you're spiritual? I've said it so many times. So many times we think we think that we're so spiritual because of all the look what we do and look what we don't do. But then you can look at a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness or a Muslim or people who we believe completely are outside of Christianity. If we reject Catholicism as being the true gospel, you've got Catholics who give up their whole life to become a nun or a monk or a priest, and they give up so much. Well, does that prove that they're more spiritual? We can't, our spirituality has to go beyond just the things we do and don't do. There's got to be something else deeper to show our spirituality. How do you truly measure your spirituality? That's an important question, right? Now, look in contrast. So there's the prideful man, right? There's the prideful man. Look at the other person, the publican. Verse 13. The publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. You know why he would not look up his eyes to God? Because he knows if he looked up his eyes to God, he would see a God that is too holy, that is too pure, and he was already aware of his infirmities. I will argue, the one, even though the publican would not look up his eyes unto heaven, the publican had actually seen God in a sense, not in a physical way, but he had seen God in a spiritual way, because when you truly see God, then you see yourself as you really are. The Pharisee, he had not seen God, because you know what? All he could see, pride doesn't allow you to see God. Pride only sees yourself. And you think you're worshiping God when all you're worshiping yourself. The publican truly had seen God. And when you see God, you realize God is holy and you're not. And you're like, woe is me, I am undone. But you can't see God through the lens of pride. Pride blinds you to God. Humility allows you to see God. So the publican standing afar off would not as much as his eyes, would not lift up as so much as his eyes unto heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man, now please note, the publican doesn't do anything the publican man doesn't list anything to prove his spirituality. Remember, the Pharisee gave his reasons of what makes him spiritual. The publican didn't even say he was spiritual. So how do you measure your spirituality? Verse 14, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. So, why do you think God starts with pride? Why do you think God starts with pride? Why? Why do you think he starts with pride? 2, how is pride evident in your life? Number 3, how do you measure your spirituality? How do you measure your spirituality? All right. I should be writing these things down, but I didn't. So I'm just going from memory. So if I mess these numbers up, I apologize. So number 1, because this is your exercise today. Number 1, all right, I'm trying to really get you to dig in. Why do you think God starts with pride of the list of things that he hates that are an abomination? He starts with a proud look. Why? Number 2, and it's very important. How is pride evident in your life? I really want you to find out how it's evident. Well, how is it showing up? You've got to identify it, right? Number 3, how do you measure your spirituality? How do you measure your spirituality? Like when it comes to you determining how spiritual are, what do you just list the things that you do and don't do, or is there something else? And then here's the next one. Everyone that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Right now, this one's going to be 2 parts, but I'm going to put them together. Right, this is very important. I want you to listen to it. I want you to identify one way in which you have exalted yourself. Write down one example of a way in which you exalted yourself. I want you to write down one example of a way in which you exalted yourself, and I want you to write down an example of a way in which you abased yourself. Give me an example of how you exalted yourself. How? And look, if you don't know, ask someone in your family. They can probably say, hey, you remember when you did it? And then you're like, okay, stop talking. Don't allow it to create a family argument. You get the idea. And then write down an example of how you abased yourself. All right, so let's go through these again. Number 1, explain, write down, in writing, why do you think God started with pride? Why? Now, you may go with the things I offered up. You may have a good cross-reference that I haven't even offered up yet. Do that. All right. So, but there's the first question you have to struggle with. All right. I want to make sure you understand that. Why? Second, identify how pride is evident in your life. Give me an example of how pride has shown itself in your life. It's evident right now. Don't think of 20 years ago. Try to identify where pride is showing up in your life today. Or recently, or as recent as possible. Number 3, how do you measure your spirituality? Do you measure your spirituality by listing all the things you do and don't do? Is that the way you do it? Is that how? Right? That's very important. Okay. Number 4, this is very important. Write down one example of how you have exalted yourself and one example of how you have abased yourself. Right? Those are some things I want you to work on, okay? I want you to work on those. And then here's what I want you to do. I want you to compile a list of 5 scriptures dealing with pride, 5 scriptures that mention pride specifically, maybe a verse that mentions humility, or a verse that gives an example of someone demonstrating pride. Just 5 verses. I want you to compile a list of 5 verses that deal with the subject of pride in one way or another. Right? It may deal with pride by the fact that it focuses on what humility is. It may give an example. Just 5 verses. 5 verses. I want you to really think about that. All right? Now, I got some notes here. I found this in a book dealing with pride. I've got a couple of books here dealing with pride. And I'm just going to read some of this to you, all right? Are you in danger of pride? Are you in danger of pride? Well, we are all in danger of pride because I think pride is built into our sinful heart. I think it's a part of our sinful nature. And they say, humble yourself before God and ask him to show you if you exhibit any of these indications of arrogance. And they're going to give a number of indications. He thinks these things indicate arrogance. So before I give you these indications, all right, I want you to just go through those questions again. Number 1, I want you to answer, why does God start with pride? Of all the things he hates, why does he start with pride? Why doesn't he start with, sexual sin? Why does he start with something else? But he starts with pride, all right? Well, I'm about to give you another reason why I think he starts, but I'm not. All right. So why does he start there? Number 2, please write down how pride is evident in your life right now. The most recent example of where you know that it's evident. I want to make sure you do that. Number 3, write down how you measure your spirituality. How do you measure how spiritual you are? What do you list certain things? Do you believe you're more spiritual because you haven't committed an act of sexual immorality, so you're better than those who you haven't? Like what makes you spiritual? Like how do you measure it? How do you qualify it? Number 4, give an example of how you have exalted yourself. And give an example of how you have abased yourself, right? What does that mean? Like, give an example of that. Next, write down 5 verses that pertain to the subject of pride. Or you can say 5 verses that pertain to the subject of pride and humility. All right? Do that. Now, here I have a list, according to at least one source, that these things are indications of arrogance. And you can see if you agree or disagree with each one of these. Here we go. Number 1, do you work hard to be number 1 because your success defines your worth? Do you work hard to be number 1 because your success defines your worth? In other words, you're working hard and you do so because somehow your success makes you feel valuable. It's given your sense of worth, because that means you're not finding your sense of worth in Christ. You're finding your sense of worth in your accomplishments. So it becomes about you. This elevates you. Do you work hard to be number 1 because your success defines your worth? Number 2, do you have a need to be the center of attention to draw everyone's notice through your attire or actions? Do you have a need to be the center of attention? You want everyone looking at you. You want everyone noticing you. And of course, you want everyone noticing you and looking at you. And you want everyone thinking that you're smarter, better, stronger, the best. You want everyone's praise. Now, as a pastor, whoa, that's confession time. It's hard not to preach and want, in a sense, to be the center of everyone's attention. You want people to say that you were good. You want people to tell you that was the best sermon they've ever heard. When you do a podcast, you want to get that email saying that was amazing. You do want that. So then it becomes about you. Well, it's not just the pastor. It can be anyone in any situation. You need people's approval. I think that's a sign of pride when you long for people's approval. I think sometimes people, sometimes it may be perceived that, those people cave in and they go along with the crowd because they're not strong, or they're too weak, or they're too mild, or there's some kind of they're so humble that they got to go along with other people. I think really the people who cave and they need everyone's approval, and they don't want to lose a friend, and I think that's because of pride. I think it's stinking pride because you need other people's approval because it's about you. I look, that's the one area of my life where I've always stood strong. When I walked to the front door of any school and the kids told me I have to do A, B, C, or D, I'm like, I'm not doing A, B, C, and D because I don't need your approval. I don't need your friendship. I don't need you at all. Now, you could argue that's pride too, okay? But the point is I think if you cave because you need other people's approval, it's because it's about you. You need their praise. And you can't do that. So do you have a need to be the center of attention to draw everyone's notice through your attire or action? Next, do you refer to yourself often or seek the praise of others in your conversation? Now, man, I'm guilty of doing this a lot. When you're having a conversation with someone, you start referring to yourself. You refer to yourself. Now, I know sometimes you do that because you're sitting around the table and people are telling stories about their days in high school, so you start telling your stories. But I think we have to ask ourselves, is that a little bit of that hint of pride? Because what I'm trying to do, I'm not just trying to preach this to you. I'm trying to preach this to me. I've got to do this Bible study exercise as well. And yeah. Sometimes I'll ask myself in preaching, I do a lot of references to my stories. Now, sometimes you do that because you can't give an illustration. Sometimes you can't give an illustration of something you didn't experience. You got to give an illustration of something you went through. So sometimes I'll go, did I talk about myself too much? Did I make that sermon about me? And I know I've done it. I've done it way too many times. I get caught up in telling that story about me because I want to tell the story about me. And so then the sermon became about me and not about Christ. That's one of the dangers of giving illustrations. Now, I'm not against giving illustrations. Jesus gave illustrations all the time. Those parables were illustrations. So it's okay to tell a story. It's just Jesus made up the story, or maybe he used a real story, whatever the case. Maybe we can get a whole discussion there. But the point is, he just gave a story to illustrate it. So giving an illustration is perfectly okay. But if I'm giving an illustration based on something in my life, am I giving an illustration to illustrate a point, or am I giving an illustration to exalt myself? When you're talking about yourself in a conversation, why are you talking about yourself? To exalt yourself? That's exalting self. There's an example. Right? So let me go through these again. Do you refer to yourself often or seek the praise of others in your conversation? Next, do you look for opportunities to interact with prominent people while often ignoring people who are seemingly less fortunate? When you have an opportunity to interact with people, who do you interact with? Look, we're aware of this reality going all the way back to school. In other words, you walk into the cafeteria. Think about this from your own high school experience. You walk into the cafeteria. Now, for those who are homeschooled, I can't relate to you, okay? But for those who lived in the public school world, you walk into the cafeteria. There's the table with the popular kids, and you know that they're your friends, and you can go over there and hang out with them, and you're welcome there, and they're the cool kids, and being with them helps you. And okay, or there's a table over there with the kid who's got Down syndrome. Nobody's sitting next to him because he's weird. There's the kid with a handicap. There's the kid who, for some, they've got a horrible outbreak on their face, and they're quote unquote, they're not part of the beautiful people. They're not part of the popular people. They're the nerd. They're weird. They're rejected, and they're sitting there by themselves. What do you do? You know what you do? You know what many of us would do? We'd go sit with the popular people. Now, I had a tendency not to sit with the popular people just out of principle, just because I was going to stand against them, which in some cases was just more about exalting myself. There still was pride there. I was always the one taking a stand against everybody, but sometimes it was because maybe I was taking a stand against everyone to just exalt myself. That's a whole different story. But I'm just saying, what do you do? I'll give you an example. I remember when I was at a one pastor's conference really bothered me. I was going to Bible college. I was going to become a pastor, and I was at this conference, and I was all excited to talk to these pastors. And I'll never forget how I felt, because basically after the conference, whenever we would go into where everybody was eating, because it was like kind of a smaller church, but these were pretty popular pastors, at least in the independent fundamental Baptist world. But no matter if they were popular or not, these were pastors of churches, and they were preachers. So they would come in to where they had the food in the fellowship hall, and that I was hoping that I could sit with these pastors and talk to them. But they had nothing to do with me. The pastors were going to sit together, talk to one another, and they ignored everyone else. And I never forgot that no matter what I tried to do, it's like I couldn't get their attention. I couldn't get 3 seconds of their time. I was a nobody. So who was I? What difference do I make? And I always felt like, well, so they were more worried about, and then if I could get close to the conversation, it seemed like they were more worried about building up how great their church was. Like, our church had an attendance of 500 people. And it was all about building up their own egos, where there was someone there that, a young pastor that they could have, a young preacher boy who they could have brought over to the table to give advice and encouragement and help out and say, hey, we can help you. But no. They had no time for me. No time for me. Now, again, I'm upset about that. Listen, me being upset about that is also, though, an example of pride, because I felt like I deserved it. So there's pride even in myself. But I'm just saying, what do you do? Do you go to the prominent people, or do you go to the outcast? Who are you drawn to? We're usually not drawn to the outcast. You know why we're not drawn to the outcast? because then it will reflect on us, and we don't want to be looked down upon by everyone. All right. So do you look for opportunities to interact with prominent people while ignoring people who are seemingly less fortunate? But please note what I just did. I gave a story about myself. See? So did I give that illustration for the right reason or the wrong reason? Right? See, you got to be, this is the thing about really analyzing yourself. Do you rebel and fail to pray in your relationship with God? Do you rebel and fail to pray in your relationship with God? Next, do you ever refuse to do a task because it is too menial or beneath you? Would you be embarrassed? Let's be honest. A situation goes bad in your life, and you end up having to become a sanitation worker. You're on the back of a trash truck, and the truck stops, and you pick up people's trash and dump it into the trash truck and take it out to the city dump. That's your work. And because everything went bad, that's your job now. And you've been doing the job for 6 months, and you get an invitation to your high school reunion. Do you go? Do you say, I'm not going to go? And if you do go, do you lie about your job? Would you be embarrassed to tell everyone that you're a sanitation worker? Would you be embarrassed to tell everyone you're a janitor? Or would you try to somehow elevate what you do to a greater level of significance? We've all been there. We've all been there. I mean, again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to speak this to exalt self. I'm trying to do this to show how dangerous it is that even I can be impacted. I'm a pastor of a small church in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I'm the most insignificant. I don't count for jack. Okay. I don't count for anything. I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody and a little church nowhere. And sometimes when people visit, I've had visitors who after the service, they'll walk up to me and go, why are you there? Like, you seem to be very well educated. You seem to be a good preacher. Why are you preaching in a church in the middle of nowhere? And there's a part of me sometimes that go, why am I in a church in the middle of nowhere? That feeling is not really there anymore. It used to be there more. Now my church has demonstrated such a love and mercy and grace and support for me that it would be wrong to ever think that. But there maybe was a time younger on that I felt like, why? I do need to be more. And so then when people would ask me, well, if like another pastor would contact me, how many people are in your church? There's always this part of me that goes, do I want to tell them the number or do I want to exaggerate it? Yeah, I know you're shocked. Look, this is about, if we're going to do a Bible study exercise about pride, we have to really look into ourselves. That's the whole point. And I have to acknowledge sometimes those thoughts have been there. Because this is what I would be quick to do. Well, our church, this is what I would typically say. Well, our church is small. I did this so many times, especially when I was a younger pastor, and pastors would call me. I would say something like this. Oh boy, this is embarrassing to even say it. This is how ungodly that it showed up in my life. I would say something like, well, our church is small, however, and then I would talk about how many downloads we had in a podcast. How many people listen to us online? Now, I'm doing that because that was pure pride. That was pure pride. So I don't want to be known as just doing the menial task. I don't want to be known as doing something that seems insignificant. No, I should be like, I'm a proud pastor of a little small church in the middle of nowhere, Texas, that has very few people, and we're basically insignificant. And you're going to look down upon us. But I'm not saying prideful of that. That would be wrong. But I am more than happy to acknowledge that and not embarrassed by it. But yeah, so you're getting my confession. Where's your confession? What would you do? Are you embarrassed to be known for doing that menial task, that job that no one wants to do because it's below you? Some of the younger people in our church go to college. What would you do if the people in college saw you doing some job that that would be embarrassing? Would you be embarrassed by it? Would you refuse to do it? Do you find it difficult to be pleased about another person's success? Do you find it difficult when other people are successful and it bothers you? Do you have a hard time asking for forgiveness or accepting criticism? Oh, boy. Asking for forgiveness, man, or accepting criticism. Man, accepting criticism is not easy. I don't like it. I hate criticism. There's times I hate criticism. But then there's times, what I try to do is no matter how much I hate the criticism, I try my best. And I don't always, say again, I'm using myself as an illustration, but I'm trying to do so to be honest. What I try to do, I do my best. If I get criticism, I try to walk away. And as much as I may have initially defended myself, I try to walk away and go, is there any truth to that criticism? Is there any truth? Is there any truth? What can I do? I try my best. I don't always succeed, but I try. And do you often think or say, I can handle it? I got it. I can handle it. Because you don't want to acknowledge weakness. You don't want to acknowledge that you can't get it. I have to use, this is funny. We watch me, Landon, Liam, grandkids, Landon and Liam, we love to watch. There 3 shows they love to watch are Hawaii Five-0, Chicago Fire, and Chicago PD. Okay. Why they love these shows? Well, they're young boys, and so you got cops and guns. Okay, you get the idea. Now, I don't let them watch every episode of Chicago PD or even Hawaii Five-0. I'll look at the description, and some of it, especially if they deal with certain kinds of crime, then, I'm like, and we're going to skip that. Okay, but I do like they're very good with me. If you've ever watched television with me, you don't just watch television with me. You use television, and then you stop and you analyze the story arc, the characters, who is the protagonist, who's the antagonist. We talk about motivations, why, how come, this, that. They do so. And Landon is really good at asking like great questions about motivations and reasons and whys and how come. Well, we'd been watching a lot of Chicago Fire, like just day after day after day. We were trying to catch up because the new season's about to start. I think the new season starts tonight, actually, of Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and Chicago PD. I need to be home for all of that. Okay, so we were right there. We've been watching a bunch of them. And in Chicago Fire, these firefighters experience, tragedy, death, horrible things. And no matter how bad the situation is, someone will ask them, how are you doing? And every single time they would say, I'm fine. Clearly they're not fine. They end up in, basically alcoholics or depression or whatever. Their lives are falling apart. And Lennon said one day, why do they keep saying I'm fine when they're not? And I'm like, I don't know, but everyone in this show says they're fine. It's like, first of all, you got tired of everyone asking them, how are you doing? Because you knew the answer was going to be, I'm fine, no matter how bad their lives are being destroyed. And I said, well, you know what? You know why they say that? Because of pride. When we're not okay, we need to say we're not okay. Sometimes in the church, we don't think we're willing, we don't have freedom to say, I'm not okay. I'm not doing okay. I'm struggling with sin. But because we don't want anyone to know we're struggling with sin because of pride. These are some of the telltale signs of pride. So, let me give your assignments again. All right? Why do you think God starts with pride? Why? Of all the sins he could give us to start with, he starts with pride. Why? Why not sexual sin? Why not all the things that get all of the press, that gets all of the attention? Rarely do you see anyone a pastor fell into the sin of pride. No, it's always sexual sin. And then they may throw pride in there later at some point. But, pride, it's a sin. So pride. Number 2, identify how pride is evident in your life right now. How is it evident in your life? Number 3, explain to me how you measure your spirituality. How do you measure spirituality? Number 4, give an example of how you've exalted yourself and give an example of how you have abased yourself. Next, provide 5 scriptures dealing with pride, and then just consider all of the things I just gave you as the telltale signs. Those are the telltale signs of pride and arrogance. Consider those. All right, I'm going to stop right there because this Bible study exercise has gone now almost an hour. But I really wanted to take, and there's far more I wanted. When you get into the subject of pride, there's so much more we could look at. But I at least wanted to just throw this out there, and I hope that people will take it serious and really dig into it. this today, afternoon time now, lunchtime now. Man, I hate, there's so much more I want to, there's so many things I need to do, and I didn't get to any of them today. Well, this one I wanted to do, so this one was on my list, but there's so many other things I wanted to get to. But yeah, let's just, I pray that God, I'm going to pray right now. Lord God, I just pray that you will use this Bible study exercise in all of our lives, my life and the life of everyone listening, so that we would truly spend some time examining our own hearts, and that you would help us see the pride that's in us, to help us repent of that pride and replace that pride with true godly humility. We ask this in Jesus' name. And God's people said, amen. Thank you for listening. Give me any feedback. See? What did I just do? I just asked for feedback. You know what? I'm not even going to give my email. Thank you for listening. May God bless you as you study his word today. God bless.